Hello and welcome to the sixth and final chapter of my inquiry into the nature and causes of metoo. This is the other channel I don't want my boss to know about. My name is David Bos and I want to remain anonymous. Chapter 6, Summary. Since this has been a long series of videos and I don't want people to walk away with the feeling that this has been a lot of ifs and maybes without taking a clear stance, let me summarize my key arguments here. 1. No matter the public outrage, we have to remember the old rule, innocent until proven guilty. If we readily believe that a person could be a sexual predator, we at least have to take into account that any claim, even if not a blatant lie, could be a subjective view of the matter and is therefore no substitute for a proper legal case. If we give up on this principle, we might be in much bigger trouble as a society than we can even think of. 2. Based on my own experiences with James David Christie, I can say that in this specific case, the allegations seem to be at least plausible. This, in turn, is confirmation for me that not all of the metoo allegations are just made up, but that there are indeed people out there that abuse their authority and power to force people psychologically and sometimes also physically to perform sexual deeds of sorts. This might seem obvious to those people that anyway believe most of the victims, but I know that there are many people out there that see metoo primarily as a witch hunt that is politically motivated. 3. The sexual revolution on one hand, but also the introduction of women into the workforce has created challenges for the workplace and universities, which prior to that were relatively desexualized environments. Given the fact that most universities are rather liberal and progressive environments, it is not surprising that they have apparently been inconsequent in enforcing their own rules. Finally, following those existing rules could be something very tangible that could be enforced immediately and might be a much better starting point for change rather than introducing new rules that try to regulate the behavior and language of everybody at the university and in society at large. 4. While students, according to those existing policies, are not officially able to act in consent due to the power inequality, they still are adults, mostly confronted with a moral choice on whether to participate in certain activities or not. These choices usually are tied to prospects of career opportunities. As such, I cannot help but at least hand partial responsibility to students that engage in affairs with teachers or singers that go to private appointments with conductors, or with actors that sit down on the casting couch in a producer's hotel room. All those adults should know that this is not the official way of doing things, and still they often give it a try to see what's possibly in it for them. 5. Since most of these cases show a clear power dynamic going on, it seems that the difference in power is one of the biggest enablers of those cases of sexual misconduct. It is the power of one person to promise the other person something desirable, other than themselves. And so it is that very opportunity that makes victims fall for it. Especially in the arts, so-called networking has gone out of control. It's all about who you know, who knows you, who supports you, who pushes you, what favors you do to others, and which favors you receive in return. Now, part of this is just a natural result of human interactions. But when practically everybody has to be in some sort of circle or several separate circles that keeps them relevant, then this turns into lobbyism and into a situation where you'll have to play along, at least somewhere, if you want to make it. Your only choice being which of the different circles is willing to accept you and whether your attitudes and opinions are compatible. To an extent, this seems to be quite a natural process, and I certainly won't propose the state deciding who gets to play a concert where or which actor gets a role. But if we accept this as a natural state of affairs, then we also have to conclude that some of those favors and relations might be of a sexual nature, and that they are thus part of the game, which is exactly the way it has been treated in the entertainment industry for a long time, probably at least for the past 100 years. If we want to change this, we have to rethink the way artists get jobs. And again, we have to be very careful what we wish for. A centralized state deciding on who gets to do what only makes the power dynamic even worse. While the state might not rape you, potentially it might be even one of the more unpleasant bosses in history. So it's really a case of picking your poison. 6. While sexual misconduct, as for instance seen in the case of James David Christie, is absolutely to be condemned, it is very important that we make clear differences between different degrees of misconduct and/or harassment. That includes stopping to whine about every little thing somebody says to us, whether it's on the street or in the workplace. If it gets out of hand, we have to do something about it. And if somebody is indeed being abused, that's not an easy thing to do. We should support people to step forward sooner rather than later, but we also have to keep people accountable for their own actions and make it clear that not everything that rubs us the wrong way is a reason to cry wolf. Next up are 2 points that I haven't specifically covered in this video, as they are based on my other findings and thus more self-explanatory than deserving of lots of discussion. 7. Public outrage culture destroys discussion. Period. We need to act like adults and be willing and able to discuss things that might seem alien to our own perceptions. The alternative can only lead inevitably to dictatorship. 8. Social media is a battlefield. The news story of Jim Christie's abuse was met with a lot of silence on my social media, despite me having tons of organists in my Facebook. Many of those that chose not to comment have met him in the past, and while not all would have gotten the impression I got of him, I know for sure that many more knew, or at least could have known if they had wished to, than those that admitted at this point. It was an air of complicit silence, and I myself felt quite strongly that by not speaking up against this behavior for years, we all were partially to be blamed for this situation. We can't avoid taking personal responsibility for the society we'd like to live in and complain later on that it's as ugly as it turned out to be. Also, I've read from 1 or 2 well-known young organists some comments that talked a lot about the pain that needed to be healed, and that even though they studied with him, they were the lucky ones that never noticed, etc. Not only do I have trouble believing that people couldn't see through the disguise after studying with such a person closely for several years, it feels like those people absolve themselves while at the same time placing themselves in a position of authority from which they share their blessings. It's what I call pulling a Pontius Pilate. These statements were in fact quite similar to the fuzzy stuff you'd read after most terrorist attacks. They only serve the purpose to generate attention for those that are well known already anyway, but it leads us nowhere closer to a solution of this problem. If we are, as explored earlier, tribal in nature, then we need to understand that all we're doing is replacing one dominance hierarchy with another. And that is exactly the danger of a movement such as metoo. Rather than treating the topic with the respect and the broadness that it deserves, it instead limits itself to certain target groups, victim groups, certain actions, certain perceived reasons, etc. The spokespeople of such groups are never the young girl down the road that was abused for years by her uncle. It's always some Hollywood stars, or at least some wannabes, some budding young talents that will change the world, and others of that ilk. Another parallel of this can be seen in the art but fair movement that has run out of steam some time ago already, but which at least served the purpose of establishing its poster lady, a semi-renowned singer, at a higher level of fame, putting her on TV shows and discussion panels at least for some time. It is almost always people that break out from the middle class of an existing dominance hierarchy and try to establish themselves on a higher level in their new hierarchy. And for such a hierarchy to work, as always, a lot of followers at the bottom of the pyramid are needed. Now, if we can't live without those dominance hierarchies, then why should we be bothered by this? Why is the new one any worse than the old one? Well, that depends on the situation. But the main factor should be whether those people up in the dominance hierarchy did anything constructive to reach that level of power, or whether people just claim this position for socio-political reasons. To assume that the new hierarchy would be any more humane than the previous one is a dangerous assumption, as again we can see in the case of Asia Argento, but we see it also mirrored in plenty of revolutionary scenarios throughout history. That also doesn't mean that old hierarchies should be left untouched at all costs, but whenever public outrage takes over, we're bound to make hasty and wrong decisions, because you always have to bear in mind that somebody, somewhere, is executing a plan, and by rushing our decisions, we're walking right in their trap. 9. Last but not least, I think the most important thing is to look at ourselves critically and see how we might have participated in enabling the existence of such unhealthy environments by making the wrong choice. Every time we felt that we shouldn't say something because it either might hurt our careers or that maybe we were afraid of being called prudish or intolerant, every time that happened, we contributed a little bit to an environment that allows for these things to happen. Maybe we should stop being afraid of being called out for being intolerant towards something if we think it's the wrong choice. Maybe we should stop being bullied into accepting that times have changed and that everybody does it. We should stop giving these kind of bullies the right of defining our language, deciding what's good or bad. Being sexually not too experimental isn't a bad thing, and we have to teach this to our children. We can't let powerful people, institutions, corporations, universities or the state dictate the terms of our language and the values in our society. We have to create and protect them ourselves. That's it for now. Even though there definitely are things that I've forgotten and there are always more things to explore, and also I've doubled up. As I said in the beginning, there are topics that are related to this, that I just quickly needed to touch upon. And while I'd love to expand on them in detail, this video would become unwatchably long if I did. I'll address sooner or later most of these topics in their separate shorter videos, so that finally the big picture will be even more coherent. It probably would have been more systematic to define those surrounding parameters first and make this specific video later. It might have been more to the point and more coherent then, but sometimes things don't go as planned and I just gotta go with the flow. In any case, if you've made it to the end, thanks so much for watching. I do hope that some of my ideas could spark a thought or two in some people. And if you want to chime in on this discussion, feel free to do so in the comment section. Whether long or short, all is welcome. Just try to remain civil, whatever your stance on the issue is. I'll have a look. If there are some good comments that bring up other points, whether in agreement or disagreement, I might make another video at a later stage addressing those, maybe sort of a Q&A type of thing. Oh, and while you're at it, as is obligatory, I'd like to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel, hit the bell to receive notifications, as right now this is what this channel needs the most so that it can grow to a point where it makes sense for me to produce more of these videos, as it's quite a bit of work, and of course it's motivating to know there's actually a public for the content I'm producing. But for now, that's really finally it. I hope this was food for thought for you, and I hope to see you soon on this channel. Thanks for watching.